Hello, this is Dr. Moore, and this video is about biodiversity. Biodiversity simply refers to the diversity of living things on this planet. We can divide biodiversity into 4 different levels. The broadest level of biodiversity is ecosystem diversity. And then within ecosystems, we have habitats. That's habitat diversity. And within habitats, we have species. That's species diversity. And within species, we have genetic diversity. So these are the 4 levels of biodiversity, and we're now going to go through each of them one by one, starting with ecosystem diversity. Ecosystem diversity refers to the fact that there are many different kinds of ecosystems on Earth. There are forests, there are ice caps, there are deserts, there's the open ocean. We group similar ecosystems with similar abiotic characteristics into groups called biomes. This is a map of major terrestrial or land-based biomes. There are at least 10 different major terrestrial biomes, and there are roughly an equal number of aquatic biomes, both freshwater biomes and marine biomes or saltwater biomes. Within each ecosystem, there are many different habitats, and that is habitat diversity. So in this image here, you can see that this particular ecosystem has many different kinds of habitats. There are woodlands, there are grasslands, there are wetlands, there's this stream, even something like the underside of this log could be considered a habitat. And within each habitat, we're going to find a different range of species, a different assortment of species. And that is species diversity. It's the variety of species that you can find in a particular place. A species is a group of organisms that can interbreed with one another and produce viable, healthy offspring. An important term to know is the term species richness. This is the number of different species that you find within a particular space. So in this diagram, community 1 has 1, 2, 3, 4 different kinds of species. So we would say the species richness of community 1 is 4. We have no idea how many species exist on Earth. There are 1.7 million known species, so these are species that we have described scientifically, but there are many more unknown species than known species. Most scientists estimate that there's probably in the ballpark of 10 million species on the planet. And then within species, we have genetic diversity. So again, a species is a group of organisms that can interbreed with one another. Humans are all one species. We can interbreed with one another, and yet we don't look the same. We're not identical, and that's because we have different sequences of DNA inside of our cells. That is genetic diversity. So the variation that we see within populations is driven in large part by the fact that we have different genes. Biodiversity matters because biodiversity increases resilience. Resilience is the ability to recover from a disturbance. So I'll give you 2 examples of how this happens. So first, genetic diversity is going to increase the resilience of a population. Let's imagine a population of potatoes, and this population of potatoes has low genetic diversity. The potatoes are all really similar to one another at a genetic level. And then let's say a fungus disease comes into this ecosystem, and it just so happens that all of these potatoes that are very genetically similar to one another are susceptible to the disease. That means the entire population could be wiped out. In fact, that's basically what happened during the Irish potato famine during the 19th century. There was very low genetic diversity within the Irish potato population, and so when a fungal blight came to the island, it wiped out almost all of the potatoes. Most people, or many people, either starved or emigrated to the United States as a result of that famine. Now let's imagine instead a population of potatoes with high genetic diversity. So they're all different from one another. This population of potatoes is much more likely to survive a fungal pathogen because it's more likely that there are some genetic variants that happen to be resistant to that pathogen. And those are the ones that can survive and reproduce and carry the population forward. This idea that biodiversity increases resilience can be seen at the level of species richness as well. So species diversity is going to increase the resilience of an ecosystem, and we can do a little thought experiment to see how that would work. So let's imagine a very simple ecosystem with a species richness of 3. There's grass, there's bunnies, and there's foxes. And now let's imagine there's an environmental disturbance. Let's say that the temperature of this area, the climate, gets a little bit warmer. And in fact, it gets so warm that it's beyond the ecological tolerance of the grass population. That means the grass population is wiped out, which means no food for bunnies. The bunnies get wiped out, which means no food for foxes. The foxes get wiped out. Now let's imagine a different ecosystem with slightly higher species richness. This has a species richness of 4. There's 2 different kinds of plants, plus bunnies and foxes. Same environmental change happens. The climate gets a little bit warmer, and that will wipe out the grass population, but this other plant can handle it. The heat is within its range of ecological tolerance. That means there's still food for the bunnies and there's still food for the foxes. This community can persist even though this one species got wiped out by an environmental disturbance. So biodiverse ecosystems are more resilient, and resilient ecosystems are going to provide ecosystem services under a broader range of conditions. An ecosystem service is a benefit that humans get from a natural, intact ecosystem. This can be everything from lumber to fish. It can be oxygen production or water filtration, all of the things we get from nature for free. Those are going to be preserved if there's greater biodiversity and a more resilient ecosystem. And humans depend on ecosystem services to survive. Because of this, a lot of scientists believe that preserving biodiversity is going to be as important as mitigating climate change if we want to ensure the continued survival of the human species. So that's my introduction to biodiversity.